Welcome back to Chris and Retro. I want to start off by saying thank you to the new subscribers and those that have been commenting on recent videos. Friends of another channel have been real supportive of me, and I want to say thank you to all the new people that have come on. It really does mean a lot, and the fact that you go out of your way and make some comments, I appreciate it, honestly. I appreciate that because the comments I'm getting are authentic, and it means a lot. I believe in authenticity more than anything, and loyalty, and so thank you so much for that. Tonight's video is going to be about fear. And I find that fear across our lives is probably the biggest inhibitor to any progress that we make or success that we produce. One thing, a friend of mine, Brian, we came to the conclusion several years back on another show that we were doing that fear really isn't a thing. And what I mean by that, and what we were discussing, is the fact that fear itself is nothing. What it is creating is a thought that creates the worst possible scenario or a terrible scenario or something that you want to avoid. And if nothing else, that non-thing causes your mind to think a certain way, and your actions oftentimes, at least in my life, stall. One thing that I've learned with fear as I move through life and move through my own recovery journey, as well as my professional accomplishments, and also with those that I coach that are on my teams. Fear, I go through it, I face it, I understand it's there, and recognize that usually my thoughts about that are the worst possible scenario. And if I look back historically at my life, I would say that the vast majority, I would easily say 95% of the time, that I've feared the worst case scenario. It really hasn't played out that way. And I would even say in places that I've created pretty awful situations for myself where the odds are stacked against me, even then the fear didn't play out as greatly as I thought it would be. So for the point of this video will be to talk about fear and share some personal experiences that I hope will help you as you address the very thing that puts the brakes on things in our life. I mean, not for nothing. Look at how the media manipulates us. They do it because they want us to be afraid of something, and we have to. If you're afraid of it, you must act to do everything you can to save yourself. And I really just don't espouse to that. I don't think it's beneficial. And quite honestly, even if the worst case scenario came to, why would I waste every single day up to that point living as if it was happening every single day? It just doesn't make sense to me to live that way. So I just choose not to. When I was a kid growing up, I had a cousin of mine. He was like a brother. His name's Jeff. And man, that kid and I got in so much trouble. It was unbelievable. He was an older cousin than mine. And we would just constantly get ourselves into stuff. But we rode motorcycles as kids, rode bikes. We played together. We did everything together. Well, there was a show that used to be on TV every Friday night. It was called Friday Fright Night. And on Friday Fright Night, they would come up with these great horror movies. And my cousin loved to stay up and watch those movies. Well, there was one I remember that came up. And it was a film. I thought, until I did this video and I looked it up in the background, I thought it was Shriek of the Mangled. It's actually not Shriek of the Mangled. It's Shriek of the Mutilated, which is even more creative and more fearful. Well, Shriek of the Mutilated, my cousin and I watched. Now, I think this came on probably about 11 o'clock at night. And we weren't, I think at the time I was probably 8 years old, 7, 8 years old. And my cousin would have been 9 or 10. And so we were watching this Shriek of the Mangled, or Shriek of the Mutilated. Now, it wasn't enough that we watched this movie. For my cousin, he always had to add an extra layer of craziness to these types of things. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little clip for you of the Shriek of the Mutilated and introduce you to a real cultural gem that I don't think you'll ever be the same. And I was honestly surprised I could even find it on YouTube.
The abominable snowman, the Yeti, or is it? A scientific expedition that turns into a nightmare for all but a few, with the surprise ending of the year.
Sometimes it almost sounds like.
So you're getting a sense of what the Shriek of the Mutilated was. It's high quality TV, great graphics. I mean, some of the attack scenes, I'll fast forward here. There's one at the end here. They actually show one of the attacks, which is just horribly terrifying. You can see the marker on that person's face. The point of it is that, as you can see, this was an unbelievably terrifying movie for me as a child to watch. And so Shriek of the Mutilated was just this fearful thing. And it created for us a scenario that, you didn't want to go in the woods. I mean, you didn't want to do anything. But my cousin, being who he was, decided he wanted to face his fears in such a bizarre way. And I'm not sure if it was to face his fears or to create fears in me, but he decided, and we lived next to this state wooded area called High Tour, and he would decided we were going to go walking through the woods. Now, the creature, which was a yeti or something like that, and it was a white yeti, which they weren't sure if it was an abominable snowman or if it was a yeti, was the big debate in the trailer. He would dodge between trees super fast and then just appear and kill these people in this movie. Well, for us now, my cousin decides at 11 o'clock at night that we're going to go walking around after having just seen this thing do all these awful things. He wanted to go in its natural habitat, which at that age I was convinced was literally outside of his window. Good news is we went out there and saw nothing. I didn't die of a heart attack or because of a white yeti. The end of the day, though, we faced our fears and lived through it. Now, this is kind of a crazy and silly example for sure. I wouldn't recommend that you take your children out there and watch a scary movie at night and then make them go into the habitat of the creature that was killing everybody on TV. I don't think that's advisable for any circumstances. But what it did do is illustrate a few things. So when we think about fear, it often is this white yeti diving around through the trees. I think about it in our professional setting. You know, I've got a team of salespeople, and one of the challenges we have is approaching tougher customers. You know, how do we get in front of them because we fear rejection. We fear a lot of times, you know, if somebody's more technical than us and they understand more information, are we going to seem like a fool trying to explain that to them? That's one area that we are afraid. Another one is just in accomplishing goals, you know, pushing through. What happens if I fail? I think of the recovery community. What happens if I have to face the rest of my life? How am I ever going to face the rest of my life without one more drink? How am I going to ever face life and all the tough stuff that is everything going on around me without my substance of choice to hide from everything? Fearing facing things and how horrible that's going to be to have to face it. Well, I look back on the business scenario, and great success comes when you push through those unknowns, those scary places. Some of the greatest accomplishments I've had in my career and those that I've seen other people accomplish has been through going through fearful things. When we look at the recovery journey itself and what we accomplish in recovery, I look backwards on all those that have sustained recovery, and 9 out of 10 times I could actually cite seasons of fear that they went through, but they did it through a few tangible ways. And I would encourage anybody that's going through a time when you are afraid is, first of all, recognize fear what it is. It's just a thought. It's the manifestation in your head of the worst possible scenario where you're at. Face it, go forward. Now, I'm not saying it's not a tough time. So, for example, if you're going into like in a business situation or in a sport fighting or whatever else, and you're going into a challenging skill set stretching season, of course, there's reason to be cautious and fearful. So, how do you eliminate the fear in that place? Well, I don't know if you ever eliminate it, but you're driven by it so that you actually mitigate what can actually happen to you by preparation. So, one way I would deal with fear is making sure you're very well prepared for tougher seasons in life. And how do we do that? Well, we do it by making sure that we're surrounded by people that give us advice that have been there before. We use known tools and known resources that resonate with us that we can rely on when push comes to shove and we might not be thinking so clearly. For me, I'm a big proponent of a plan. And in the last video I shared, talking about bouncing rocks off my other cousin's head and talking about, football players that aren't making passes correctly, that starts with making a plan and sticking to the plan. Fearful scenarios can go through because when I take out all the other variables, the variable for me is just the next measurable objective that I'm trying to accomplish and not all of these scary things that are going on around me. I'm not professing that we will not be afraid. I'm not professing that I'm not afraid. Let's get real. There's a certain amount of fear that goes in every single video I do for you guys. It's just the way it is. I mean, I don't want to fail. I don't want to look like a fool. I want to make sure the content is worthwhile. Is it even anything? Am I just talking gibberish to you guys? Who knows? I mean, viewership will play that out. I think there's value, so I move forward because I've got a plan. But it doesn't mean that fear goes away. It's not going to. That's a false hope. But recognize it for what it is and put it where it is. Now, one thing I can tell you, and I can say this confidently, if you're afraid of white yetis going through the woods in Italy Valley and the hills in Italy Valley, you're safe. There's no white yetis down there, no matter what the shriek of the mutilated, I thought mangled, mutilated, tells you. And no matter how late you watch it or how many nights in a row you've stayed up that made you tired enough to actually believe that nonsense was real. What is interesting, though, is that when I think back to my childhood image of that and what that movie actually did in front of my eyes, and now I go back and watch this nonsense. The movie was made in 1974, for God's sakes. By the time I saw it, it was probably 10 years old. That's took a lot of fear out of that movie for me as well. But I hope this was encouraging to you and helps you have a message forward. Think about fear for what it is. Don't expect it to go away, but see it for what it is. It's just not a real thing. It's thoughts. It's a worst case scenario thought. Put a solid plan together. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure you got the skills in place to face the tough times. And if it's something you know you're going to have to face, it's tough. Get ready for it. Make sure you got good supports around you and go forward. Go right through it. Hope you guys have a great night. Please make sure you like and subscribe, and by all means, spread the word. If you like what's on here, tell other people. Let them know. And I would love to have some feedback. If you comment in the comments section, or if you want to send me a message at chris@chrisandretro.com, please do that. I'd love to hear from you, see what other content you'd like to see on here. If you've got guests you'd like me to pull on or subject matter, I definitely want to hear what you're looking for. In the meantime, I'll just keep going forward and appreciate everything you're doing. And thanks again for all the new subscribers. Have a good day.